Good evening, everybody. Welcome in to Live and Learn, episode 2. Hope it's been a great day. Thank you for joining me tonight. We have a lot to dive into, a lot to talk about. A different background than Monday night, a little different. You might see me cut in and out of the feed because behind me is MetLife Stadium, which is the home of the New York Jets, the New York Giants. The New York Jets have been in the news as of late, and I thought it'd be interesting they are going to be a part of the show today. We're going to be talking some football with interesting things happening in the world of professional football. So that is coming later on in the program. We'll talk about the Jets and their decision to fire their former head coach, Robert Saleh. So that is forthcoming. But it's been a busy couple days since we last spoke. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 p.m. Live and Learn, Facebook, YouTube. It's on Spotify and Apple if you cannot reach us when I am live. So it's awesome. I'm stoked that this has begun, and I hope you all had fun on Monday, and we'll have some fun again tonight because we have some great stories to dive into. And let's not waste any time. Let's start with quick hits. The New York Mets take a 2-1 series lead over the Philadelphia Phillies, winning at Citi Field in New York. Game 4 currently ongoing. If the Phillies lose, their season is over. The Mets' kind of Cinderella run looks to continue. Great pitching from Sean Manaea, who goes 7 innings. You now have Jose Quintana on the mound, who has been pitching great as well, but the New York Mets have a 2-1 series lead over the Philadelphia Phillies in the NLDS. Padres defeat the Dodgers in another thoroughly entertaining game in San Diego. Dodgers early lead. Padres take it back. They were leading 6-1 at one point until a grand slam from former Blue Jay Teoscar Hernandez. But the bullpen of the Dodgers pitch a clean last 5 innings. For the Padres, pitch a clean last 5 innings. And the Padres win 6-5. And now we have Game 4 later on tonight where the Padres will look to win a series on the road as a slight underdog, which has been great. Fernando Tatis Jr. has become a star again, went through the steroid debacle, if you will. You had Manny Machado. You had a team full of stars that had their ups and downs this year, but they beat up the Braves, and now they're beating up the Dodgers, and the Dodgers can only really complain. Their starting pitching has not been any good in this series. Jack Flaherty was awful. Their starting pitcher from Walker Buehler was not much better last night, so they are on their faces. That is a 10:08 first pitch tonight in a must-win for the Dodgers. Quick hit, Utah Hockey Club win the first game in franchise history. They're no longer Arizona. It's Utah. Great environment. I watched the first 2 periods. It was fun. Credit to Ray Ferraro, who called a game in Seattle and then called a game in Utah on the same day. That's impressive. But Utah, Dylan Guenther scores the first goal in franchise history. Clayton Keller gets on the board. But great crowd in Utah. They beat the Chicago Blackhawks. And I'm happy for the team. What was happening in Arizona was a joke, really. And I'm happy that they have a new way about them. Their owner, he's different. You see him with a backwards hat, with a hoodie, shorts on. He's very much new age. He's got money. He can do what he wants. It's his team. I think they can push to be a playoff team. I think they're actually a decent team if their goaltending can hold up. But credit to Utah, they win Game 1 against albeit a bad, Chicago Blackhawks team. That brings us to headlines, because we have a lot today. During the show today, we'll have 3 kind of feature stories where We're going to talk about the Jets. We're going to talk about the Canadian teams that I did not get to talk about on Monday's show. And then I will do my predictions for the divisions and the Stanley Cup final prediction, which I'm sure will be wrong because trade deadlines, things of that nature. But we'll get into that later on in the program. Headlines today. Number of things happened if you weren't paying attention today. Let's start with this story. Anthony Stolarz named the opening night starter for the Toronto Maple Leafs, not Joseph Woll, because he's dealing with a lower body injury. Now, this isn't that surprising. Joe Woll is hurt every other day, it seems. He's only played 4 periods in the preseason. He was hurt multiple times last year. He was hurt in Game 6 prior to the Game 7 loss to the Boston Bruins. Anthony Stolarz comes over from Florida, won a Stanley Cup as a backup goaltender, is a mammoth of a man, and I made this point on Monday. I don't believe the Maple Leafs have a number one goaltender because Joe Woll is never available, and when you haven't played enough games, you do not just deserve the net. You don't automatically get it. So it's very much an open competition in the 6. Now, opening night can be overblown. Opening night is a spectacle because it's the start of a new season. It's hope. You don't want to start 0-1. You prefer to be 1-0, start to the season. But it's one game. It doesn't have to define you, but it can put you on the right foot. New Jersey is a hell of a lot happier at 2-0 than the Buffalo Sabres are coming back from Prague at 0-2. So there is a difference there. I would say this about Joe Woll. He is behind the 8 ball, and he's becoming more and more of a liability for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think more importantly, his teammates. The one thing I think you like most in a boss, in fellow employees, teammates, things of that nature, is you want predictability. You want confidence. You want trust that people are going to show up, that people are going to be there when you need them. Joe Woll does not have that with his teammates because he's never available. He's constantly hurt. He's always dealing with something. He couldn't play in a Game 7, for Christ's sake. You go through a whole summer, you go through a training camp, and he's not available to start the season. Joe Woll is uber talented. There's no debate about that. Incredibly skilled. You listen to goalie experts like Steve Valiquette, who I think is actually really, really smart, works for MSG, played for the Rangers for a long time. He talks about Joe Woll being so talented. But if you can be uber talented, but if you can't get on the ice, that talent is irrelevant. It's one game, but if I'm the Maple Leafs, I'm concerned because this isn't just a one-time incident. This is a guy who's never available. This is a guy who is constantly injured. I think the Maple Leafs have a pretty good team. We're going to do predictions later on. Goaltending and center ice are their 2 weaknesses. But goaltending, you go, Joe Woll's the future. Joe Woll can be a number 1 in this league. Perhaps Joe Woll can be the next Jeremy Swayman. Those are all projection. That's all talk. There's no evidence. There's no time on the ice to validate that opinion. He hasn't played 100 games yet in his career because he's always injured. To me, what this signals is that it's very much an open crease in Toronto, and that position is wide open. They made a conscious decision to not address it further. They got Stollarts, and they had Joe Woll. And Matt Murray's in the organization, and Thomas Hildeby is liked by some. But the Maple Leafs have very little experience at the goaltending position. And the guy they want to label as their future is a liability when it comes to health. It's a concern. It's not panic because it's night one, but this guy's always injured. He's never available. So it has to be a concern. If I was a player on the team, I would be a little worried. Looking around going, who's our goaltending? Who's playing? The Maple Leafs play tomorrow night as well. They play a back-to-back in New Jersey. Who's starting that game? If Joe Woll can't play tonight, I can't imagine he can play tomorrow. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Does that mean they go Stollarts back-to-back to start the year? Does that mean Hildeby gets a start? He's in the American League this morning. It's just an eye-opener for me, Leaf fans, that your number one goaltender is never available. When he's in the net, he plays fantastic. But that's the operative word, when he's in the net. And he's never in the net. He's never available. Constantly hurt. But he's got all the potential in the world. All the potential means very little to me. I don't really care. Because it's about results. This isn't Anaheim where you can play 5 goalies in a season because you have no expectations. The Maple Leafs, and you make jokes about Toronto, and I can make jokes about Toronto at times. What's not a joke is Toronto is probably one of 8 to 10 teams that can actually win the Stanley Cup. And some Leaf fans might hear that and laugh, but it's true. Your team could do it. You have the firepower. You have some of the best players in the world. You have a coach that's won a Stanley Cup with lesser players. Are you better than Detroit? Sure. Are you better than Buffalo? Sure. You're better than Columbus, Pittsburgh, Washington, Montreal, Ottawa. I just named about half the teams in the Eastern Conference. We're down to about 5. That's my point. That's just in the East. You better than Anaheim. You better than San Jose. You better than Utah. Better than Seattle. Better than Calgary. We go through this. They are in that group. I like tracking all the teams. I like watching games. I do. But I can get caught down a rabbit hole of watching bad teams that I know will do nothing come April. Maple Leafs will be there come April. They made the playoffs 8 years in a row. But goaltending is an issue because it's not available night one. Headline number 2. The Ottawa Senators, and it's a heavy goaltending headlines, I will say. The Ottawa Senators and newly acquired goaltender Linus Ullmark agreed to a 4-year, $33 million extension. That's $8.25 million per season for Ullmark. He was in a tandem with the Boston Bruins alongside Jeremy Swayman. He's also a Vezina Trophy winner. I'll start off by saying this. I like Linus Ullmark. I liked the trade for the Ottawa Senators. It's not a Korpisalo. It's not a Cam Talbot you're acquiring somebody that's proven that can win best goaltender in the sport, because that's what the Vezina Trophy is. However, that's not the thing I'm most interested in this. My first thought when I see deals is, who won it? Team or player? And I think this one's a little more nuanced, because I'm more interested in the timing of the deal. I read a lot this summer. Bruce Garriock, who does do a really good job covering the Senators. Sean Simpson on Twitter, big homer for the Senators. They talked a lot about hearing that an Ullmark extension would get done before the start of the season. And the Ottawa Senators open their season tomorrow against the Boston Bruins. So that happened to be true. My thought is, would it have been at this number? Linus Ullmark, good goaltender. Played really well in Boston in front of a really good team that defends really well, fundamentals out the wazoo, and just a structurally strong team. McAvoy, Carlo, Andrew, they had good defense in front of him. He also had to make the saves, which he did. But Boston saw Swayman, younger, probably a little better. We're going to go with Swayman long term. So they trade Ullmark to a division rival in Ottawa who desperately needed him. And Boston couldn't afford him, quite frankly. Because of their cap situation, they were stuck, and every team knew they had to get rid of Linus Ullmark, and they didn't get a whole lot for him, which is weird for a goalie who won a Vezina, but that was the situation that they were in. Jeremy Swayman got $8.66 million per season. Ullmark gets $8.25 million per season. 4 less years and a little bit less money. Now, Ullmark, 31. Swayman, 26. I think Ullmark is good. I'm happy to see the goalie market start to skyrocket when it comes to salary, because goaltending is the most important position in the sport. Period. It's just like quarterback. That'll never change about football, and goaltending will never change about hockey. I love defense. I do. And I think defense is the toughest position to play. I think it's more difficult than goaltending, quite frankly. But goaltending is more important, because you can defend a play incredibly well. But if you don't have somebody there to make an easy save after a great defending, it's for nothing. Ottawa likes to dive in. They like to give players longer-term deals that necessarily don't deserve it. Ullmark hasn't played a game yet. Still has a year left. You could have let him play it out. They decided not to. 8.25 is a lot of money. If he plays well, which I think he will, you can stomach it. But to me, if Swayman doesn't get $8.66 million on Sunday morning, Linus Ullmark does not get $8.25 million Tuesday morning. They're connected to me because they played together in Boston. They played in front of the same team. And they both had great numbers. They were both really good goaltenders. And Ullmark won a Vezina. I'm happy for Ullmark. I think the Senators do finally have a good goaltender. Korpisalo was not the answer. We saw that last night in Florida's win against the Boston Bruins in night 1. But it's interesting. I would have waited because I've seen too many goalies that Ottawa choose to bring in that don't work. And them giving a goalie a contract after not really seeing him play is kind of like Groundhog Day. I'm expecting to see Bill Murray because this is their formula. This is what they do, and it rarely works. But oddly enough, with the Senators, with the Maple Leafs position, the Oilers running it back, we're seeing a lot of teams stick to their guns, stick to their plan, so to speak, on how to approach winning. Going against the proverbial, this is the wrong way to do it. Buying into their game plan, which is interesting. But Ottawa doing this, it's a choice. Will it backfire? Time will tell. I do think that this was a calculated decision. And it happened because the Swayman part of this also happened. Maybe they're not connected. I think they are. Final headline, Joey Decord, former goaltender of the Ottawa Senators, was drafted by the Ottawa Senators, has bounced around. You might not know the name. He's a goaltender for the Seattle Kraken. 28 years old, has played in the AHL, ECHL, bounced around the league. He signs a 5-year, $25 million extension with the Kraken. He played 50 games last year, career high for him. It's a gamble. He played well. Seattle's a team, should have won yesterday, but they threw a game away against St. Louis. They still don't have a lot of high-end talent. They have a lot of flaws in their roster. Decord's a goalie. They also have Grubauer there still, who signed up long-term. Ron Francis in Seattle, I'm a little puzzled what they're doing. They need draft picks to hit. They need their Shane Wright to be good this year playing in the NHL. They need Riker Evans to be good. It's an older bunch of players and two goalies that I don't think either of them are number one. It's a middle of the pack team playing average hockey the entire year. That's the Seattle Kraken to me. Nobody could pull a Vegas. Nobody could pull a Vegas and have a great team year one. But the benefit for, say, a Utah, who is a team that pivots from Arizona to Utah, is they bring a lot of good talent with them. Clayton Keller is a good player. Lawson Krause, good player. Dylan Guenther, good player. Mikhail Sergachev, acquired via trade, good. Sean Durzi, good player. I don't think Utah's a bad team. They're better than Seattle. That's for sure. We'll talk about standings, things of that nature later on, but it's a puzzling one for me from Seattle. Why they do this, it kind of just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay. Feature story number 1. The podcast background is of MetLife Stadium. And let's get into the New York Football Jets. On Tuesday morning, Jets owner Woody Johnson fired head coach Robert Saleh. Saleh had come into work like a regular day, went to his office. Woody walked down and told him he had been relieved of his duties. He was not allowed to address the team. He was not allowed to say any goodbyes. He was then escorted by security out of the building. Incredibly weird behavior, but it does align with the New York Jets. The Jets were in London on Sunday. They lost to the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Rodgers threw 3 interceptions, including a pick six. And the Jets are 2-3 on the season, preparing to play the Buffalo Bills on Monday night. To me, if I go, well, okay, what are the Jets going to do? I didn't expect Robert Saleh to be fired at this point. I expected, okay, they are going to trade for Devontae Adams with the Las Vegas Raiders, bring him in to help Aaron Rodgers, help the offense. Maybe anything fire Nathaniel Hackett, because I don't think he's a good offensive coordinator. He was horrible in Denver. He's been horrible with the Jets. And it was then reported by multiple outlets that Robert Saleh was planning on firing Nathaniel Hackett prior to himself being fired on Tuesday. Interesting angles here. Woody Johnson said he talked to Aaron Rodgers on Monday night, but they did not discuss Robert Saleh being fired. First of all, I don't believe that. I think Aaron Rodgers has his hands in every proverbial cookie jar in that organization. He's the quarterback. You traded a lot for him. He was the savior. He was the missing piece on a good team. He's going to be involved in decision-making. So, first lie from Woody Johnson. They fire Saleh and they name their defensive coordinator the head coach. I don't think they're losing games because Saleh is he was a defensive coordinator with the 49ers. Had a lot of success, and he was a good coordinator. I don't think he's a great head coach, but I don't think he's the reason for them struggling. The reason for struggling is their offense. The New York Jets have scored as many points under Aaron Rodgers this year as they did with Zach Wilson after 5 games last season. Just think about that. The same number of points with Aaron Rodgers than they did with Zach Wilson, who's now quarterback 3 on the Denver Broncos. I picked the Jets to get to the AFC Championship game because I believed in Aaron. But this offense looks so predictable. He looks afraid to commit throwing passes to Garrett Wilson. Their offensive line cannot create holes in the running game. And they turn the ball over. They give points to the other team. But since Rex Ryan, who coached the Jets from 2009 to 2014, where he got to 2 AFC Championship games, I might add, the Jets have gone through 3 head coaches. They've gone through 8 quarterbacks, and they haven't made the playoffs once. Had Todd Bowles for 3 years, 2015 to 2018. Gase for a season and a bit, 32 games, and Robert Saleh was the head coach for 56 games. Todd Bowles was 24-40. Adam Gase was 9-23, and Robert Saleh was 20-36. They're not good at choosing head coaches, and they're a desperate organization that will do whatever a fancy face wants them to do. Aaron wants Nathaniel Hackett. You're hired. Aaron wants Alan Lazard, We'll sign you. He doesn't want to run these pass patterns. Okay, you don't have to do it over here. To me, the Jets are just stranded. They don't know what they're doing. They stay relevant because they're the New York Jets. It's like the Cowboys. Cowboys at least make the playoffs every year. The Jets don't. I don't believe Aaron Rodgers is washed. I don't think he's a horrible quarterback. But I think the coaching, the offensive coaching on this team is below average. No creativity. And it's just boring. It's a boring brand of football to watch. For this season, this is a desperation play. 100% from the Jets. We have to fire this guy, hoping it will spark the team. Okay, well, Jeff Ulbrich has been the defensive coordinator on the Jets for multiple years. Robert Saleh hired him. They have a history together. It's not like somebody new is coming into the organization to coach. Aaron's still there, all the same players. My advice to the Jets, trade for Davante Adams. They have to. Davante's not playing again this week for the Las Vegas Raiders. That was announced today. And Adam Schefter was reporting it may take a couple weeks for salary cap reasons for the trade to happen. Take the hit and trade for him now. You fired your coach. You need to win games. No guarantee you wait till November. November 5th is the NFL trade deadline. You may not be ready. You may not be in a position to compete. So here's what the Jets have coming up. Monday night, they host the Buffalo Bills, and they are an underdog going into that game at home. The Jets then go to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. Following week at the Patriots, easier game, division, followed by home to the Houston Texans on a Thursday night. That's not an easy game. The Bills, Steelers, Texans, those all could be losses for the New York Jets and how they've been playing. Aaron's got 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the season. Aaron Rodgers goes an entire season without 4 interceptions, not 5 games. Justin Fields has 1 interception to compare the two guys, if you're talking about quarterbacks right now. You don't have time to wait. You need that offense to come alive. You need Davante Adams with Allen Lazard and with Garrett Wilson. They need their tight ends to block better, to create something in the run game, because you have 2 great running backs in Breece Hall and in Braylon Allen. But they're virtually irrelevant right now because they can't do anything once they get the ball. If the season went completely wrong, Robert Saleh would have been fired the last day of the season if they missed. I don't think this should have happened now. I don't think it's his fault. But he gets blamed for it because you can't fire the quarterback and you can't fire the owner. Cleveland Browns won't bench Deshaun Watson. It's not because he's horrible at quarterback, which he is. They're not going to bench him because they don't want to admit they made a mistake trading for him and signing him to the worst contract in the history of professional sports. That albatross that they have. Rich guys don't like to, nobody likes to admit that they're wrong, but rich people really don't. Because they made all these great decisions. They're rich. And they go, oh, I couldn't have made that mistake. They do. There are more owners in professional sports who are stupid, quite frankly, to dumb it down to their level, who are stupid than are good owners. It's really easy to be a stupid owner of a professional sports team. Really easy. But then you can see good examples like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Rooney family. Really good. They don't get involved. They don't do stupid stuff. So certain things can happen that way. But for the Jets, see in the comment, Dolphins need to fire the head coach and GM. Interesting. I would definitely think the GM is on the hot seat in Miami more than the head coach. Signing Tua Tagovailoa to a long-term deal was always stupid in my opinion. You have a wounded bird as a quarterback, a guy with multiple head injuries. Yes, he can play, but if you're not available, you're useless, and he's never available. But the Dolphins are kind of like the Jets. They're in a really tough spot. The Dolphins are another team with really bad ownership. Since Stephen Ross took over, they haven't won a playoff game. He's owned the team for 25 years. They haven't won a playoff game in that time frame. Never. Yes, he's built nice tennis courts that they can hold the Miami Open. And yes, now they have F1 down there. But when it comes to the Dolphins, he's been a complete tire fire. If you look at the AFCs, Bob Kraft has been the only good owner in that division for a long time. He was winning all the time, letting Bill Belichick make decisions. He shut up and sat back and let it happen. Stephen Ross had to get involved. Woody Johnson has to have his fingers in everything with the Jets. And then you had the Pagulas who seem to make dumb decision after dumb decision in Buffalo. They've righted the ship some, but the Sabres still stink in the NHL. And they own both. The Jets moving forward, I don't know. I had them going to the AFC Championship game. I have real doubts about that. But seasons can turn around. The Chiefs lost to the Raiders on Christmas Day last year. And they won the Super Bowl. Nobody ever would have thought that. Underdog in every game. They're now 5-0 to start this year. They were 6-1 last year. They finished the season 11-6. So teams can hit rock bottom and come out the other side and be okay. I do believe this game Monday night is huge. If the Jets beat the Bills at home on Monday, they're in first place in their division. Because the Bills have lost 2 in a row. And Josh Allen played like crap on Sunday. And he was probably concussed and he was allowed back in the game. So good on you, NFL. But the division's still wide open. The Jets could grab it if they want it. Absolutely. So the opportunity is there. Do I trust the Jets? No, I don't, because I'd have no reason to. They're a gong show franchise. Dumb decision after dumb decision. I like Aaron Rodgers. I'm reading his book currently. Interesting book. Interesting guy. Interesting family. But they got to put it together. And it starts with Aaron. And Woody Johnson shutting the hell up, preferably. Let's go to story number 2 today. On Monday, I talked Toronto, great detail. I talked about the Edmonton Oilers in the National Hockey League and their outlook on this upcoming season. But I want to talk about some other teams, the other Canadian teams that we can dive into a little bit today. And let's start with the Vancouver Canucks. Vancouver made it to the second round of the playoffs last year. Rick Tocchet, Coach of the Year. Great season. Surprising everybody, but they have expectations going into this season. I think they have the expectation to, at the very least, finish second in the Pacific Division. At the very least, make the playoffs and be competitive. Well, for Vancouver, their season starts in a mercurial, weird way where Thatcher Demko, their number one goaltender, is on injured reserve. He's recovering from a muscle injury that few doctors have ever seen, reportedly. It's an unknown issue, and that sparks trouble. They claimed a goaltender off the Boston Bruins waiver wire on Tuesday, hoping to add another goalie into the fold. And they start the season with Artur Shilos and Kevin Lankinen as their 1-2 in net. Better than the Maple Leafs, I'll tell you that. With a wounded Bird and Joseph Woll, you're not getting anywhere with that goaltending tandem. Thatcher Demko is an established number one. He just needs to be on the ice, and he's not available. Wasn't available in the playoffs. Not available to start this season. Looking around him, Vancouver, after a great season, didn't just stand pat. They keep JT Miller, Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, Philip Hronek, the nucleus of their team, but a lot of new faces. They went to Boston for a purge. They bring in Jake DeBrusk, son of Louis, born in Edmonton. He gets a 7-year deal from the Vancouver Canucks. Will start the season on a wing alongside Elias Pettersson, which should be interesting. The biggest name for me that they have brought in, I like Jake DeBrusk. He's a competitor. The biggest knock on him is his inconsistency at times. Really good playoff performer. Very successful in Boston. They will miss him, certainly. But Jake DeBrusk comes. Danton Heinen, another former member of the Boston Bruins. Third line checking. Really good on the penalty kill. Reliable player. Smart. Good in his own zone. He comes in to help their depth issues at the bottom of their lineup. Derek Forbort, defenseman for the Boston Bruins. He's added to the mix. They also add Vinny Desharnais from Edmonton, huge 6'7" defenseman on the back end. So they have a strong six. And you also look around, you see Daniel Sprong come in on a 1-year deal, who I think could be a sneaky good signing. The kid can score. And you'll see Atu Ratu, who is a former first rounder of the New York Islanders, who they got in the Brock Besser trade. This kid's Finnish. He's played a couple seasons in the American Hockey League. Bounced around, was always hoping to crack a roster. Well, now at the age of 21, he'll be 22 in November. He makes Vancouver's opening night. He played 3 games in 22-23 for the Canucks. He is on their opening night roster. So a great story for Ratu. I look at Vancouver. They're a really good team. They absolutely can compete with the Edmonton Oilers. They have a much better defense than the Edmonton Oilers. I like their players up front. I think they got a mix of guys that can do a variety of things. They're also missing Dakota Joshua, who emerged as a great third liner last year. He had surgery in the offseason. He had a cancer issue that he had to remove. I think he might have. I forget the cancer, but he had something removed. So he's out to start the season. So I look at Vancouver, really strong team again. I love Rick Tocchet. I think they've been doing smart things. It's just about continuing the success. They were playing with house money last year. No pressure, just hoping for some success if they can find it. And they did. A lot of it. Their advantage is they play in the Pacific. The Pacific is not a strong division. And they'll get to play a lot of weaker teams, quite frankly. I like Vancouver. I am high on them. We'll get to where I see them finishing in the Pacific in just a second. But again, their biggest concern is Thatcher Demko, and is he going to be available? When is he going to come back? Is he going to come back? Because if he's not available for the majority of this season, this team is not a Stanley Cup contender. This team is not threatening. And this team could miss the playoffs without him. Because their goaltending tandem is really no experience, unproven, less experience than the Maple Leafs tandem. And two teams that have high expectations, two teams that are 2 of the 10 that could win a Stanley Cup this year. Calgary. Calgary's not going to be a great team. We'll get that out of the way. Sorry for the people in Alberta. You'll be watching a lot of the Oilers games as they win, and you won't be, quite frankly. But the Calgary Flames interest me this year more than they have in past seasons, because I knew Calgary wasn't going to be good last year. The year before was such a disaster. But Calgary is interesting in this sense for my taste. They're going through a rebuild, and they have a lot of young players that they're going to try, and I want to see younger players play. Like, I know who Jonathan Huberdeau is at this point of his career. He's fine. He had 52 points last year. He had 55 the year before. He's a depreciating asset. He doesn't play a whole lot of ice time anymore. He can't score goals. He gets paid a hell of a lot of money for work he did in Florida that hasn't translated to Calgary. Tough. So I know him. Michael Backlund. Michael Backlund's a captain. He's been there forever. He's older guy. I know what he is. I look around and I go, Daniil Miramanov, who they got in a trade from the Vegas Golden Knights. I look at Nikita Ochuk, Connor Zary, Martin Pospisil, Samuel Honzek. Those are just a few names. You likely don't know any of them, and I don't blame you. That's why I'm here. Calgary, their season is about trying out players, trying out draft picks. Honzek was a second rounder. Big body, plays the wing, number 42. I think he's going to be a good NHLer. Martin Pospisil is a center iceman. He's a rat. Pisses off a lot of players. He had 232 hits last year, 109 penalty minutes, plus 14 on a bad team. I like him. Connor Zary, a lot of potential. 34 points in his rookie year, not horrible. 14 goals, I think that'll go up this year. They need to play him more than 15 minutes per night. I like him. I think he can play. Daniil Miramanov, drafted by Vegas. He's played in 49 NHL games to this point. A lot of experience in the American League, 7 points in 20 games for Calgary at the tail end of last year. I like this kid. He should play every night this year because I look at Calgary's defense. The only two that should be guaranteed ice time are Rasmus Anderson and Mackenzie Weegar, and that's it. The rest, you go Braden Pakal, Nikita Ochuk, Miramanov, Joel Hanley, Jake Bean, and Tyson Barrie, who made the team on a PTO. And Kevin Ball, who they got in a trade for New Jersey with the Markstrom deal. You can play him too. So those three. Other than that, it's a rotating door. Who's playing well? Who's having good practices? Calgary's not going to be competitive, but they're interesting. They're more interesting than they were last year to me. But I might be a sicko. So who knows? But I like the Calgary. I'm interested in watching. But will they be good? No, they will not be. Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg loses Tyler Toffoli. They lose Sean Monahan. Two big losses that they never really replaced. In particular, Monahan up the center ice. That is a weakness for the Flames. But I still think Winnipeg's a good team. They play in the Central, which will be more competitive than the Pacific. But I do think the Jets, looking at Scheifele, Gabe Vilardi, Kyle Connor, Cole Perfetti, Nikolai Ehlers, Captain Adam Lowry, Nino Niederreiter, Alex Iafallo, they have a very similar roster. And a lot of players, none of which are superstars, but all that can play and that know their role quite well, I might add. They are not going to think there's something that they're not. Rick Bowness retired, so Scott Arniel, who was on the bench, becomes the head coach. To me, Winnipeg should be a playoff team again. Winnipeg, I don't love their defense, but I never do. Josh Morrissey, Dylan DeMello, Sandberg, Neil Pionk, Hayden Fleury, Colin Miller. Little thin. No real alpha on that back end. Connor Hellebuck, Capo Kakinen, their goaltender. Their best player is their goalie. So, on paper, they've gotten worse. Because losing Toffoli and losing Monahan and not really replacing those players doesn't look great. And some of their younger prospects, like a Brad Lambert, who was a first-rounder, hasn't really translated. He might never be an NHL player after being cut again in training camp, sent back to Manitoba. So Winnipeg, they're in that mix for Stanley Cup. I don't think they can win it. But will they be a playoff team? Yes, I think so. But are they on that Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver level in Canada? I think they are one step below those three teams. I would put them in a category slightly ahead of this next team, the Ottawa Senators. This is it for the Ottawa Senators. You got to make the playoffs this year. I mentioned Groundhog Day, sign a goalie, day one, Linus Allmark. You finally have it set up. You have a good team around it, which they do, by the way. And you're ready to go. You're ready to play. Drake Batherson, Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Claude Giroux, healthy Josh Norris, Ridley Gregg, David Perron, who comes over from the Detroit Red Wings, a healthy Shane Pinto, also not suspended Shane Pinto, just to name a few. They lose Jacob Chychrun to the nation's capital in the States. But Jake Sanderson, Artem Zub, Thomas Chabot, Nick Jensen, who I like, Tyler Cleven, Travis Hamonic on the back end. This is a good team, but I've said that before. Many analysts have said that before. I like this team. It should be a competitive team. It shouldn't be a team that misses the playoffs by 16 points, and that's exactly what happened to the Ottawa Senators last year. Linus Ullmark is their biggest X factor. Can he be the goalie they expect him to be? They had the 30th worst save percentage last year in the entire NHL. 32 teams, 30th worst. That is pretty bad. So just mediocre goaltending will suffice for the Ottawa Senators. Travis Green, new head coach, really hard training camp reportedly. They've gotten involved in brouhahas with the Montreal Canadiens already. I think a lot of those guys know this is it for that team. Brady Tkachuk is only going to put up with it for so long before he says, I'm an American. What the hell am I doing in a Canadian city like his brother did? Yes, I'm the captain, but screw this place. If the Ottawa Senators don't make the playoffs this year, it'll have to be a player change because they fired a GM, they fired head coaches, they brought in a whole new brass with Dave Poulin and Steve Stais, a lot of new eyes on this team. It'll be up to players to be moved. They have a lot of young talent who they signed to long-term deals. Batherson, 7 years. Stützle, 8 years. Tkachuk, 8 years. Norris got an 8-year deal. Gregg, I think, got 5. So all these guys were given long-term extensions believing that it would be something special or at least something competitive. They haven't made the playoffs. Brady Tkachuk is entering year 7 of his career. He hasn't played in a playoff game. Ever. Not one. And that guy is uber competitive. 30-plus goals last great season last year for Brady Tkachuk. They missed the playoffs by 16 points. With adequate goaltending, I believe the Ottawa Senators will be a playoff team. Will be competitive. Won't be a joke. Won't be discussed as this what if. Playoff predictions coming in just a minute. And we'll close out Canada with the Canadiens de Montréal. Montreal. Martin St. Louis, still the head coach. No Patrick Laine for a while, as we know. No David Rickenbacker for a while, as we know, with a knee surgery. So Montreal is a young team surrounded by old veterans that they're waiting for their contracts to run out so that they can be competitive. Montreal very well could finish last in the Atlantic Division. It's the toughest division in sports, and they are the worst team. Point blank. They just are. I like parts of their team. I think Nick Suzuki's a good player. I think he's the modern Patrice Bergeron. He has that level of upside for me. Cole Caulfield is... I want him to be great. I thought he'd score 40 goals last year, and that was a big slap in my face because he didn't. I want him to be great, but he's never scored 30 goals in his career. And he's a high-scoring winger. Now, he did go from 36 points to 65, so good job by him, spreading the puck around a little bit, but he's a goal scorer. I want to see him shoot the puck more. I want him to see him be an emphasis on the power play. 9 power play goals, which is good. 21 power play points. I need more. Jaromir Slafkovsky. Big jump for him. Year 1 to year 2. Went from 4 goals to 20. Played in all 82 games. 50 points. I think he'll have another good year. I like Slavkovsky. Newhook's a player. I don't think he's a really great player. I don't think he's there, Alex Newhook. 34 points in 55 games. That's fine. He's fine. Kirby Dach back healthy. Hopefully he can stay healthy. He's been injured his whole career, really. Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher, who remains there, they can't get rid of. Caden Gooley in the back end, Mike Matheson, David Savard, Justin Barron, and Lane Hudson, who's really the talking point going into this season for the Montreal Canadiens. Their future on the back end, extremely talented, incredibly gifted skater, smart, good feel for the game, and I think he's going to be a difference maker. He's the future of their defense corps. Lane Hudson. He's starting the season tonight. He's playing. The game starts in about 20 minutes after puck drop and all that crap in Montreal. I'm curious to watch him. I think the kid could be special. Was really good in college. Will get every opportunity to do it in the pros. Had 2 points in 2 games for Montreal at the tail end of last year after he signed his pro contract. Played 22 minutes a night. I think he'll play a lot of minutes. It's on a bad team. Samuel Montembeault, Caden Primo, they're 2 goaltenders, both youngsters. 2 guys on both sides still really trying to prove that they are number one, that they could be number one goalies, that they are really pro goaltenders, I might add. So Montreal, I don't expect to be good. As I said, I think they very well could finish last in the Atlantic Division. We'll see. But they got some work to do. It's getting to that point where they have to go, when are we going to be competitive? How much longer will the city of Montreal accept that we are below average year after year after year? I don't think that much longer. Because Montreal loves their hockey. That's something we all know. They love the Montreal Canadiens a lot. That brings us to story number 3. Predictions for each division and how I see things going. This was an easy assignment and a hard assignment because I think picking top teams that you like is easy. Going through the weeds can be tricky. Some divisions are easier than others. Start with the Atlantic. To me, in the Atlantic, for me, going through this, there were 3 teams that I looked at that were going to finish in the top 3, and I never really wavered on the top 3. And those are Toronto, Boston, Florida. I think Toronto is going to win the Atlantic this year. Despite the fact that their goaltending is starting out in a weird spot, and I don't love their center ice position, I think they can make it work. Craig Berube is a good coach. It's a new feel. It is a new vibe. It's not the same Maple Leafs. And they've always been a good regular season team, but they've never won the division. I think Toronto will win the Atlantic Division this year. Matthews, Marner, Nylander all have fantastic seasons. Their defense, which is improved, will play well enough for them to be competitive and for them to stay in it. And Joe Woll will get back healthy and play some games. Second, I have the Florida Panthers. Florida, reigning, defending Stanley Cup champions, 1-0 in the season. My concern with Florida, they lost a lot of their defense after last year. They still have Bob and Spencer Knight, which is a solid tandem. But their defense with Adam Boquist back there and some other guys that just don't have the experience aren't that heavy either. The bottom of their forward group, a little left to be desired as well. And I don't think they'll have that push to win the Atlantic. After winning the Cup, the regular season can become a little mundane. So I think they'll be a big threat come playoff time, no doubt about it. But I got Florida finishing in second. The Boston Bruins continued their run. Had to deal with the Swayman drama. Lose players, but they bring in Lindholm. They bring in multiple defense to kind of keep themselves competitive, which I think they will be. So I have Toronto, Florida, Boston in the Atlantic. And I think all those teams are Stanley Cup contenders. I really do. Because they're threatening. They bring different things to the table. Good teams with talent. Teams that have been in the playoffs the last number of years. So those are my top three in the Atlantic Division. Moving to the Metropolitan. For this division, I also only really have three teams that I considered. Carolina, Rangers, New Jersey. The Rangers won the President's Trophy last year. They have 19 players off that roster returning. They are motivated because they know this is their last run at it, the last dance. Igor Shesterkin is a pending unrestricted free agent who turned down $11 million a year yesterday, according to Kevin Weeks of the Mothership. So they have a lot, running into this season. New York got to a conference final, couldn't beat the Panthers. Jacob Trouba, a captain they tried to get rid of, which is always weird going into a season when you try to give away your captain, who I think is a better player than most, I believe, because I see what people say about him. Philip Hedl is healthy. You look around, they got a good club, good team. However, I have New Jersey finishing first. The New Jersey Devils under Sheldon Keefe, I'm buying into them. I think they're a good team. They're without Brett Pesce to start the year. Luke Hughes is not healthy yet, but they'll be back. And I just look at this group and go, Markstrom, really good pieces. Jack Hughes, who's a stud. Heischer, Timo Meier, Dawson Mercer, Simon Nemec, Andre Palat, who still can play at his advanced age. Jake Allen, Jacob Markstrom, that might be the best 1-2 tandem in the NHL, period, any team. So, yeah, I like New Jersey. They're fast. They need to get bigger if they're going to be a true threat to win the Stanley Cup. The regular season, kind of about finesse. And I have the Devils usurping the Rangers. Rangers finishing in second. Carolina Hurricanes, who lost a lot of talent in the offseason. Free agents leaving. They just didn't pay them, quite frankly. Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, just to name a few. Rod the Bod will have that team make the playoffs, no doubt about it, partly because they're well coached and they're a good team. Another point of that is because their division sucks. And the Metropolitan is weak. Penguins are always talked about as a team that can make the playoffs, partly because their division stinks. Columbus, not a good team. I think Columbus will finish last in the Metropolitan. Washington made the playoffs last year. They'll miss the playoffs this year. Ovi will be searching for 42 goals to pass Wayne Gretzky, which will be fascinating, and I hope he does because I love Ovechkin. But other than that, there's no real reason to watch that team. Old, slow, and interesting. Islanders, they always stay in the fight, but I don't have them finishing in the top three. And the Philadelphia Flyers, Matvei Michkov will win the Calder Trophy. But other than that, I don't see them as a threat to make the playoffs. They'll be competitive-ish, but not a threat. So we got Jersey, Rangers, Carolina, and the Metropolitan. Let's move to the Pacific. There's a 1, 2, 3, but there's only two teams that I considered to win the Pacific, and that's Edmonton and Vancouver. Because teams behind them, while they might make the playoffs in my list, I don't look at them and go, they could win this division. They can play that well for that long. I went with Edmonton for a couple of reasons. They had a horrible start last year, and they were able to turn it around, and they nearly won the division. They were close at the tail end of last year. I don't think they'll have a slow start. Their defense will need to be worked through, and that'll be a struggle to start the year, I think. Wouldn't surprise me if Edmonton loses tonight to Winnipeg, just for instance, to start the season. But Vancouver doesn't have a number one goalie. Vancouver is waiting on health from Demko, who's everything to that team. Stuart Skinner's ready. Calvin Pickard's been an established backup goalie after last year, including winning games in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that's my edge for Edmonton, is just having that stability between the pipes, knowing that he's going to be available is the difference. I have Vancouver finishing second despite the fact that I'm worried about their goaltending situation. I just like their team a whole lot. I like it more than I did at the start of last year. And they won the Pacific. Really good team. A lot to like about them. Love their coach. They will battle Edmonton this year. Those games will be fun to watch when they play each other. But I got Edmonton slightly ahead of Vancouver. In the 3-hole, I picked Vegas. Vegas, excuse me, is weird in the sense that they're not as good as they were a couple years ago, but they're still relevant. I was out there for a preseason game. Aiden Hill, Ilya Samsonov, not a bad pairing in between the pipes. Barbashev, Eichel, Pavel Dorofev, who I think could be good. Hurdle, Holtz, Bill Carlson, Keegan Colasar, who I like to take a step. Nick Waugh, Mark Stone. A lot of pieces that are good players. Back end, I still think they have one of the best back ends in the league. Nick Hag, Hannafin, McNabb, Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore, and Zach Whitecloud. All massive human beings, all over 6'3", and they bring all different elements. So with Aiden Hill, who I think will play better, a great defense, I have Vegas in that 3-hole. And also you look at Sharks, will stink, unfortunately. Ducks stink. Calgary won't be any good. We talked at the beginning, I don't think the Kraken are a very good team, unfortunately. And yeah, LA without Drew Doughty for the first couple months. He played 25 minutes a game last year. That's a huge missing piece for them. You could argue he's the most important player, Drew Doughty, even at his advanced age. So tough blow for Los Angeles. I have them missing out on the top 3 in the Pacific. Central. This was more difficult. Central's a good division. Central's got some good teams. Central's got multiple teams to me that could win the Stanley Cup. And my top 3 are in this order: Dallas, Colorado, Nashville. First off, you want to win this division because you don't want to play any of the other 2 in the first round of the playoffs. That's no fun. I'm going with Dallas because they've been such a successful team. And yes, little Joe Pavelski retired, who they will miss, but they bring in younger kids like Maverick Bork, who led the American Hockey League in scoring last year. Logan Stankoven will get a bigger role after emerging on the scene as a rookie. Goaltending, I really like. He's had some ups and downs so far. If you look at Jake Ottinger, but the kid can play. Jamie Benn, Bork, Dodonov, Duchesne, a lot of veterans. Rupe Hintz, love him. Wyatt Johnson, who is like a step away from being a star. Marchment, Sam Steele, back end, Labushkin, Esselindell, Miro Heiskanen, stud, Harley, and Dumba. They'll miss Ryan Suter, who they had to buy out for cap reasons because their defense isn't as good, but Harley is really good. Heiskanen's a superstar back there. Labushkin's solid, who they bring over from Toronto. So I think their defense will be okay. They can add to it at the trade deadline like they did with Chris Tanev last year. So I have Dallas 1, Colorado 2. Colorado has Nathan MacKinnon, who won the MVP for the first time last year, and he's one of the best players in the world. To me, he's the second best player in the world behind Connor McDavid. I don't love Colorado's goaltending. Georgiev's always a question mark, and Annunen. But you look, McKinnon, Middlestat, Nikushkin, who will return eventually, I don't trust. Rantanen, last year of his deal, he'll be wanting to play well. Miles Wood, good group. Back end, DeHaan, Sammy Girard, Cale Makar, who I think will win the Norris Trophy this year. Devon Taves, Josh Manson. Just a solid team, always competitive, has 4 of the top 25 best players in the world. I'm in. Nashville. Steven Stamkos now a member of this team, if you didn't know. Alongside guys like Philip Forsberg, Luke Evangelista, Jonathan Marchessault, Stanley Cup champion, Gustav Nyquist, Ryan O'Reilly, Stanley Cup champion, Philip Tomasino, an underrated player, Tommy Novak, a guy I like a lot. A lot of proven guys that can play, alongside guys like Roman Josi, Dante Fabro, Tanner Molendyke. Look out for him. Youngster, hasn't played an NHL game yet. Good player. Brady Shea, who they bring in from Carolina. Jeremy Lauzon, who led the NHL in hits last year. Not to mention, they re-signed UC Saros and signed Scott Wedgwood from the Dallas Stars. Hell of a tandem. To me, they lose a little bit just because I think the talent overall is better on Dallas and Colorado. And Dallas and Colorado's rosters have been together a little bit longer, so it won't take as long to mesh, in my mind. But those 3 teams are absolutely dangerous. Wild cards. We'll move back to the East. I have 2 teams from the Atlantic in wild card positions. I have the Tampa Bay Lightning and I have the Ottawa Senators. I finally have Ottawa making the playoffs. It never happens. I'm always wrong in the predictions. But I look around at these teams and I go, well, Metro. Philly, no. Pittsburgh, no. Washington, no. Columbus, no. Islanders, the only other team I considered in this division, but no. Buffalo, would love to, but I just don't believe in them. Red Wings, don't know what the hell they're doing. Stevie Y, I don't know what the hell he's doing down there. Every other team is in. I see Ottawa as the best remaining team. Tampa will be the first wild card, Ottawa the second wild card. And they have a lot to prove. Tampa's getting older as well, so I think they can be had a little bit. They're trying to keep that team competitive. That defense is not that great. But I have those 2 teams in the East. The West, I have the Los Angeles Kings, despite the fact that Doughty will miss like 3 months, making the playoffs, and the Winnipeg Jets. For Winnipeg, I had them making because I just think they're a good team. I look at St. Louis. Minnesota, Utah, and I went, they're not bad. Like, St. Louis isn't a horrible team, but they're kind of middling. They're not threatening to anybody. They're just there. Minnesota, to me, is still waiting for cap relief. They have 3 goalies right now on their roster: Fleury, Gustafsson, and Wallstat. I like Boldy. I like Kaprizov, Zuccarello, but they have a lot of guys playing higher in the lineup than I would put them in because they just don't have any other players to put those in those positions. Brock Faber is a stud of studs on the back end. Other than him, a little thin. And LA's made the playoffs a lot of years in a row. I think Quentin Byfield's going to have a really good season for the Los Angeles Kings. I think he'll be their breakout guy, 60, 70 points for him this year. Watching him in the preseason, he was really good. Had 55 last year. I'm going to go 60 plus for him this year. 20 goals, that jumps to 25, 65, 70 points. More opportunity, better positions. He's a smart hockey player. He's fast. But Byfield, Deneau, Kevin Fiala, Warren Fogle, who comes over, Tanner Jeannot comes from Tampa, Kopitar, Kempe, they still have good players up front. Defensively, they will struggle. They will need guys like Jordan Spence, Gavrikov, Edmondson, Brandt Clark to step up in his absence. But I think they'll survive it until Doughty can return around January. I have Dallas meeting the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final. They could have met in the Stanley Cup Final last year. Dallas couldn't get through. And I have Dallas winning the Stanley Cup, defeating Florida. So Florida will not repeat, but I have Dallas winning a Stanley Cup after all these attempts. And again, that Stanley Cup prediction subject to change with trade deadline, with how the season goes. But that's my prediction right now. And obviously the NHL season commenced last night. As I mentioned, we talked about the games a little bit. Tomorrow on the program, we will react to Montreal-Toronto opener, touch on Winnipeg, Edmonton, the Calgary-Vancouver game, talk about it all and preview the Thursday night games in the National Hockey League, and also react to any other breaking news that happens. But before we go today, let's do the wrap-up. The Detroit Tigers defeated the Cleveland Guardians while we were talking. Tigers now have a 2-1 series lead. Game 4 at Comerica Park in Detroit tomorrow, where they can close it out. The Cleveland Guardians have been shut out in back-to-back games. Their offense is dead. The Phillies currently lead the Mets 1-0 in the 6th inning, although the Mets do have a man on second base. As I mentioned earlier, if the Phillies lose today, that series is over. We will touch on it tomorrow, whatever happens. New Orleans Saints lost to the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday night. It was announced today Derek Carr, their starting quarterback, has a hamstring injury. He is out multiple weeks. Spencer Rattler, their 5th-round pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, formerly of Oklahoma and South Carolina, will make his first NFL start this coming weekend against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So great spot for him at home, thankfully avoiding the horrible hurricane in the Tampa, Florida area. We got those games tonight. We're going to talk Thursday night football tomorrow. We also have 2 more baseball games played tonight. Yankees, Royals in Kansas City at Kauffman Field, and Dodgers, Padres, Game 4 in San Diego. It's a lot happening. Tomorrow we'll also get into Thursday Night Football. San Francisco at Seattle. Another good game. Another interesting game that'll be interesting to talk about. We'll talk baseball and the rest of the NHL tomorrow. And we'll get into opening games. Like, Tampa only opens their season against Carolina on Friday. So we'll touch on those games to get you primed because it'll be our final show before I return on Monday to talk about the weekend and everything that's happening in the world of sports. As I mentioned earlier and throughout the process of doing this, if there is something you want me to talk about on the show, leave a note in the comments, send me a message directly, and I will touch on it because this is about you. It's about providing the best podcast that I can, and I want to talk about the things that you're interested in. So if you want me to talk things that we haven't discussed yet, please reach out, and I will do that. For all the fans out there where your teams start tonight in Canada, enjoy. I'll be back to recap it all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Noah Warren, and this is the Live and Learn podcast.